Hey, John with the Conversation That Matters for April 14th, 2017. Wanted to share with you a review for a book I read called Istanbul by Thomas F. Madden. I'm actually planning a trip to go to Istanbul, and so I wanted to know a little bit more about the city, and let me tell you, this book did not disappoint. I learned a lot from it, and just wanted to plug it in case there's anyone else who's interested in this particular city, or more generally, Western civilization. Because even if you're not going there, I think this is really just an entertaining book and an informative one. And so the reason that I recommend it is, first of all, it brings the city to life. You can see that there's a lot of change once you start getting into the history of Istanbul. The name changed, right? It was Constantinople, it was Byzantium, now it's called Istanbul. And not only did the name change, but it changed hands. So you had the Turks ruling, that's the most recent, the Ottoman Empire. And before that, you had the Romans, and of course, Constantine made it his capital. And before that, you had the Greeks. And so there's a lot of infighting between those groups. So even within, let's say the Roman era, it's like a soap opera. How many times the emperor was either deposed or something happened to change, who was the emperor. And so it's just a lot of change, a lot of great stories that honestly could make fantastic movies. I doubt most of them will be movies, but just very intriguing, very entertaining to read. And I think the author does a pretty good job in relaying some of the history. But so you see all this change, and then you also see some things that just don't seem to change, like Hagia Sophia, the church that Constantine originally, I guess, he wanted to build, but it was Justinian that built what we have today, the modern Hagia Sophia. It was a mosque under the Persians, it was a church under the Romans, and it's a museum today under Ataturk in the 30s. So it's just always seemed to have been there since the time of the Romans, and I guess it would be the 5th century or so when it was built. And then you have things like the Hippodrome, right? This area that used to be used for chariot racing in Roman times, and that area is still there. There's a monument that's been standing there for thousands of years, and it's all that's there now is the base. Unfortunately, it's been vandalized, but it was a serpent column. It was 3 serpents, and the heads have been chopped off, but the base is still there. It's pretty big, and it was made by the Greeks from the metal that was taken from Persian shields that they had defeated in battle. They took the Persian shields and they melted them down. They made this bronze snake like structure. It's still standing there. And the walls that surrounded Constantinople are still, there's portions of them still around. And so with all this change going on, certain things did not change. And you feel like you know the city, almost like it's a person after you're done reading this book, because you're thinking of the same geographic location that links Asia and Europe together, and you're seeing all the hands that it changes, but how it changes hands, I should say, so many times, but yet it's just something about it is timeless, and so it just fascinates the mind reading the history. You get to know Western civilization, I think, also through this book. Not only does it bring the city to life, but it brings Western civilization to life a little more. Think about the time of the Greeks and all the wars that happened within the Greek Empire and the wars with the Persians, and think about the Romans and Constantine and Christianity coming to the empire and the Crusades all having to go through in Constantinople. In fact, Constantinople being burned, I believe it was in the 3rd Crusade. Think about Eastern Orthodox, a new sect of Christianity forming, and then Islam coming in the 1400s, the end of the 1400s, almost 1500. It was 1492 or 3, but Islam takes over, and you have sultans ruling there, and then modernity taking over, and how Istanbul was behind the times, and then it's definitely catching up, and it's the largest city now in all of Europe. And so there's just so much change, and Western civilization changes around this city, but not just around it, but through it, because this city represents the trends of the time. It's just been such an influential city, and so you learn Western civilization through studying just this city. And I think one of the the things, this wasn't a focus of the book, but something that I really took away from it is how culture affects society. And given that I've read books by Schaeffer, Francis Schaeffer, and people that in a presuppositional kind of apologetic camp, I tend to think in terms of worldview and how worldview can affect and shape things. And this book demonstrates a lot of those things. It's like a lab for how worldview can change. Because if you think about it, Constantinople, Istanbul, right, the city is in the same area. They're dealing with the same kinds of things, the same weather, same geographic issues, and the same kinds of trades for the most part. I mean, the same economy, the same. And what ends up happening, what ends up changing the city are the cultures that dominate the city and the ideas that come to fruition there. And so you see paganism, and then you see to Christianity, and then you see corruption, and then you see Islam coming in, and how all these different belief systems affected the culture. You see prosperity coming to Istanbul, and then that prosperity being kind of taken for granted, and people wanting handouts, and this happened even in the early Roman times, and that leading to corruption. And you see ethnic animosity, lots of ethnic animosity. I think one of the ones that stands out to me is how the Greeks really did not like the Venetians, right? And there was a Venetian sort of area segment in Constantinople, and there kept being tension there, and it would be opened, and then it would be closed, and there would be fires that would be. I mean, I could go in. I don't want to go into all sorts of the detail, but it's just intriguing to see how ideas have an effect on the culture, and how really what binds a culture together isn't so much ethnicity, although that is a really powerful glue, and you see that, but really theology, religion seems to bind a culture. You see this with the Pope and the Crusades coming through Istanbul, how a lot of the Greeks did not like the rest of Western Europe, and Western Europe, a lot of the tribes in Western Europe hated each other, and how the Pope was able to just unite this huge area of diverse ethnicities and cultures into forming a crusade to oppose the advance of Islam, because they were united in religion. And you see the same thing with the Ottomans coming in, and how even the way that there were people in the Ottoman Empire that were of diverse ethnic backgrounds, but they were united in Islam. And so religion just seems to be, in my estimation, the biggest kind of glue that holds people together and gets them to do big things. And so, I don't know, just an interesting thought that I thought was evidenced by the book. So one of the things that I didn't like, this is maybe a con, is the Armenian genocide was not mentioned anywhere. And that's interesting to me. I know there's a movie coming out later this month on this, so I'm really glad it's getting some attention, but I don't know if there's a hidden agenda, but that would seem to me to be something that should have been mentioned and it wasn't. So that's the only negative thing I'd have to say. But other than that, I would say, pick it up and read it. It just reads like a story. It's good history. So there you go. Istanbul by Thomas F. Madden. If you like reading history, then this is a good one.